have a plan in life. We formed this plan so early that from birth, we plan that by the time we hit death, we will have had a life of success. Victory after victory with very few shortfalls. If we were to graph it, it would look like exponential growth. That things just get better and better until we die. Now, all of us in here know that that's not what life is like. We do have setbacks. We do have difficulties. We have times when we wrestle with God's truth and who He is and what He has done to us, even. We all have a breaking point or a boiling point. I brought out the title today, Boiling Point, as a double reference to both the point at which we and who we are is changed or revealed, but also to point out Job's point of boiling. When he had sores on his body, or boils. And what did it reveal in that moment? It revealed that Job believed in the sovereignty of God. Now, if you know the story of Job, you know how awful it is. Can you go through it with me? How many of you guys think you know the story of Job, by the way? A few of you? Yeah, well, if you're anything like me, you've kind of avoided the story of Job. I've never preached on Job. You know why? Because it's depressing. That's why. I don't want to preach a depressing message to us, right? But yet there's a beauty in it. And over the next 4 weeks, it's very possible that the lectionary will take us there once again. But it's a horrible story, isn't it? It's a heavenly story. It's one where we get to see the curtain pulled back on the reality of the universe, right? You know the story? Job starts out, the book of Job, and we hear of the amazing life that Job has. He has children and a wife. He has hundreds and hundreds, thousands of livestock, and he is super wealthy, and everything is good. And the Bible says that he was upright. He was a good man. But what happens? In that heavenly realm, the angels and the heavenly beings come before God, and Satan is amongst them. Now, whether it's actually Satan or not is a little bit debated by some scholars. Some like to say that it's the adversary. But we know that there was some spiritual being there that wanted to work against Job, and he convinces God to put Job to the test. Now, how many of you guys want to be tested today? No, right? No. Ultimately, it leads to something very beautiful for Job that could not have come in any other way. And Job declares it himself. But Job is a big book. Lots of chapters. And throughout those chapters, you can divide them into 3 sections. Really what you might call prose or dialogue. Normal language like you and I are used to, in the middle of which is poetry, and then it goes back to prose. And it's almost as if Job is a different character in that middle part. Whereas before and after, Job seems like he's got it all together, even in the midst of that chaos. But in that middle part, you see him as a complainer. Oh, curse me and let me die, he might say. And he will talk about how horrible life is. It would be better for me to have never been born at all, he will say in the middle, during that poetic part. As he's conversing with his 3 friends, remember his 3 friends? If you know the story, you'll know that his 3 friends, what did they want to do? They wanted to show Job how he's so cursed because of what? His sin. They wanted to tell Job Admit it, Job, you have secret sin. And yet God is playing out something in Job's life to demonstrate Job's faithfulness and God's sovereignty. Now, this adversary actually comes before the Lord once, and he says, just watch and see what Job will do. Give me the ability to take everything away from him. And that's what he does. He says, okay, go, but don't hurt him. Don't touch his body. And so the adversary goes and destroys everything that Job owns. Everything is in ash and ruins. His children that he loved and cared for had died. It actually tells the story of Job's story is really kind of touching. His children were kind of wayward children. They would party together. The Bible talks about their parties being long parties, and after every party, you know what Job would do? He would sacrifice an animal for atonement for the children's sins. And he was so concerned for them. He loved them. And God allowed them to be taken. And immediately after that first scenario where all of those things have happened and he's there in his ashes, and you know what Job does? He falls down and he worships God. Wow. That seems otherworldly to me. How about to you? The next scenario, the adversary is among the beings again. They go before God, and that adversary says, yeah, fine, but just touch his health. Take his health away and see what he does. And God says, fine, but do not destroy him. Don't take his life from him. And so God allows him to be afflicted. That was not in Job's plans. You've heard this expression, and some of you have even experienced this. You've lost your children and had to bury them. Has anyone in here had to do that? Have you ever had to lose one of your children? The expression is that no one should have to do that. And those are moments in time that we don't understand. We want to say that some people experience horrible things because they have sinned and brought it on themselves. The point of Job, and this is what we're going to explore, the point is that God's ways are so far above our ways that we can't even imagine the reasons that God does what he does. We have plans, and when they go the way that we think they should go, we love to take the credit. I did this. I made those decisions that led me to that exponential growth. But when we don't like the setbacks, we don't take credit. We give blame to God. We want to question or even accuse. Yet, even in those scenarios, God is sovereign. It is his plan that's being played out. We may not understand it, nor ever understand it, but he is sovereign. We cannot know his ways. We want to, but we cannot. Even in our imagination of our purposes, even in our imagination of his purposes, we fall short. We know that we can trust our loving Creator even through our greatest difficulties. We can fall on our knees and worship him. Job's biblical example challenges us all. It's difficult to imagine such great tragedy and loss and worshiping. when my nature is to complain when I forget my keys, or stub my toe, or forget something when I go to the store and come home. The stupidest small things create a spirit in us where we can easily complain. The question today is God in control? One of the scriptures that I was reminded of this morning, a beautiful one, I believe it's from Romans, that everything works together for the good of those who love him. Even when it appears like there's no way that this could be allowed from God. Ultimately, for Job, what came out of his scenario? God said to him things like this: "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world?" Where were you, Job? You remember this exchange he has with Job? Where were you? What do you know, Job? Nothing. Even in his uprightness, he had no idea. And that's our challenge today, is to know that even in all of our study, in all of our godly wisdom, in everything that we think we have a sure reason for or an understanding of, ultimately, we don't know God's purposes. And that's the lesson that Job learned, that God is sovereign. There's not always a reason that we can understand, but we trust in him. So, Father, help us to always trust in your sovereignty, regardless of the way things appear. What is your boiling point? There may come a time when those things are going to happen and we're going to question him. It's okay to have a boiling point as long as we don't have that breaking point. Amen.